Hello everyone. Welcome to this introductory tutorial to blueprints within Unreal Engine. So during this session, we're going to have a look at the blueprint system, how you open it, the features and functionality within it, and then we'll create a bit of your first sort of blueprint to use within the world. So before we start a thing, you need to understand what is blueprint and a small bit of its history. Well, effectively, Blueprint is the visual scripting system available within Unreal Engine 5. It was brought around in Unreal Engine 4 way back in 2014, and prior to that, Unreal Engine 3 or UDK had a very watered down version of what is available now, and it was called Kismet. But thankfully, it's evolved quite a bit, and the blueprints are now available for anybody to use within the engine. Even people with limited programming experience can then start to implement prototypes and design procedures within the engine using this tool set. Historically, if you wanted to program within the game engine, say you would have needed to use programming code, so you would have wrote line by line, the programming language, whatever it is, C, C++, to create the game logic. You would have built that in something like Visual Studio or something as such, compiled it up and then ran it within your game. But I say with Unreal 4 coming out, Epic brought into play this visual system, which effectively is a node-based system. So there's a few different ways to get up and running with this. And I say we've had a look at the interface prior to this point in time, and we've been up to our sort of panel at the top here, and this is the system here you're going to go to. This is the drop down here. You can see here when you click on it, you'll get options to create an empty blueprint class, open existing ones within your content browser, or open a level blueprint. So again, I think it's important to establish what's a level blueprint and what's a typical regular blueprint class. So if you think about it, level blueprint is effectively what was available way back in Kismet. You only have the logic available within this particular level you see. So if you had multiple levels within your game, which most people would, the functionality you would have to duplicate between them, and that could become very tedious very quickly. But if you've got a simple map and simple logic needed, then the level blueprint is fine to use. But if you expect your game to become a lot more complicated, you should really think about creating what you call blueprint classes. So as part of this tutorial, we're going to actually do both, and I'll show you how to do the same thing effectively at level and at a standard blueprint class level. So how do we get started here? Well, this is just the regular third person template. I've come up and I've created a new level. I've selected basic, and once you do that, this is effectively what you get. So if we hit play here, it's a completely blank world with just your third person character in it. So I'm going to put some design stuff in here. I'm going to come in here and I've used the starter content. So I'm just going to come up here and look for wall. I'm going to drag the wall in here with a door. I'm going to drag in the back of the wall, and I'm going to build a small room here. So just going to drag this up so it lines up. Then I'm going to press E to get to rotate. I'm going to hold Alt. I'm going to create a second wall here. I'm just going to line it up here by just pressing W. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time making this small room, folks. Just want to get the functionality put together here. So there we've got 4 walls. If I press E again, rotate, hold Alt, left click, drag that down, go back there, select, move it up. If we hit play, now we've got a small room to work with. Okay, so within this, we're actually going to put a light in the room so that when the player walks into the room, the light will come on. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to put a light into the room. So how do we do that? We'll go up there, quickly add the project, go to lights, and we'll select the point light here. So we've got our point light, and what I'm going to do is just move it inside the room. Okay, let's have a look at that. There we go. So we've got a light inside the room. Okay, and you can see here when you've the light selected over at the in the outliner, the details update. We could change the color of it. So let's make it more adventurous, something like that. Nice red light. Okay. So we're wanting some sort of functionality that when the player comes near this room or goes through the door, that a light comes on. So we need something for them to interact with, that they know when they have entered this space. So currently there's nothing for to be detected here for when the player walks through this area. So within Unreal, you've got these options, these things called volumes. Okay, so there's so many different ones of them here we want, but the one we want is actually a trigger volume. So I'm going to create a trigger volume, and hopefully just bring it out here. You can see it there, hopefully. And what we're going to do is we're going to line that up just inside the room. Okay, so hopefully we can see that there's an outline of this, what you call trigger volume. So when we run through here, this light comes on. So currently we haven't got the functionality set up to do that. So where do we start? So the light, we don't want the light to be on, first of all. So if we find the light in the world, I found it here, and if we scroll down, okay, we've got an option to be visible. So we want to turn that off. So I just typed in visible there and found it. So when we hit play, go back to our room, the light's off. So as I said, there's two ways for us to do this. And the way we're going to do it, first of all, is in the level blueprint. So as I said, the level blueprint, the code will only exist within this actual level you see here. So if we go up to our blueprint option at the top and then select level, open level blueprint. So when you do that, a new panel should appear, looking something like this. Now again, don't be afraid. We'll hopefully get through this, and you'll be building really complex blueprints in the near future. So let's have a look at what the sort of options you have available here. And there are going to be differences, folks, between the level blueprint and the class blueprint, but we'll see those whenever we create the class one. So you can see here over at this side we have the My Blueprint tab, and you can see it shows you elements that belong to this blueprint. So what are the variables in it, graphs, functions, etc. And then you can see here we've got a few options here. We've then got our event graph. So this area here is your event graph, and I'm just, if you remember from our controlling the orthographic views, I'm just holding my right mouse button, and you can see I'm grabbing here, moving, holding it in and moving it about. If you use the wheel mouse button, it'll zoom in and zoom out, so you can zoom out to 12 times maximum, and this may be full of blueprint code in the near future. So if you can just bear with me on this, if you left click, you can drag out, and what that does is allows you to select things. You can draw around them. So that's left mouse button and then just simply dragging around it. And then you can see here at this side we have our details panel, just the same way in our world. map, you get details panels associated with things. Well, in this case here in your blueprints, you've got that option as well, and you'll see how this evolves as we add the functionality here. So other things at the top here which are going to be really important. So you can save the asset, you can browse the assets within it. You will need to use this thing called compile, because really, folks, blueprints are programming code. So to check the logic of it, to make sure it's working, it needs to be sent to a thing called the compiler, and it'll check the what you call the syntax of what's in that script or this blueprint, and make sure it's viable. And if it's fine and dandy, it'll compile fine. If not, it'll flag and show you some errors. So we've got also this thing to do source control, but that's way beyond this. You can find things within your blueprint once it becomes a bit more complicated. You've got things called your class settings, and again, this is areas where, again, probably beyond it, so adding things like interfaces, etc. Class defaults in, you can see the details panels updated. You've got things like tick, is it replication, which means it's like a multiplayer thing, multi-network, that can take input, these sorts of things. So again, way beyond what we'll want to do in our very first session here, but it's just to make you aware that here's the panels in it. You can see down at the bottom end compiler results. So if you don't see that, just make sure it's enabled up here, because that'll tell you if there's any errors within your code, and we'll maybe deliberately break this as well. You can then hit play, and you can simulate how your code looks, and then this is actually telling you which object this is referring to within it. So this is actually referring to this my map. So again, we'll look at that as we work through here. So at the start of any sort of blueprint, be it a level or a class blueprint, you will see these two nodes typically being the two primary ones that are shown. Nothing else is linked to them, but these are the things that, you know, most scripts will actually start off with. So an event begin play is the first thing alongside a tick that gets called whenever some sort of game action needs to be generated within a blueprint. So this thing will fire once, and this thing here, as you can see, I'm just left clicking on the small executable pin here and dragging out, and it's like place node. So I'm just left clicking over the executable there, exec, dragging out with my left mouse button, and you can see that there's a whole host of these things that appear. So this event tick fires every single frame. So again, there's a balance here of when and where you would use these bits and pieces, but just to make you aware, so event begin play will do something once, event tick will make things happen every single frame. So again, just be very wary of it, but we'll have a look at those as well. But if we go back to our light, so we want to get the light into this code, and currently so we can do something to it alongside the trigger. So in our level, I'm just going to tear off the top here so you can see this. So we've got our level blueprint here, and I've selected the point light. What I want to do is just right click within my level blueprint now. So can you see that? Whenever we right click in this blank space here, you can see this option has now appeared. So if I take away that option and right click, see, there's nothing appearing at the top. Whereas if I select the point light and right click, it's saying create a reference to the point light. So that's saying give me something in this bit of logic so I can talk to that. That's pretty much what a reference that point light means. So if I left click on that, this option appears, and you can see here stores a reference to an actor in the level. So that's finding that specific point light within the level for you. If we put a secondary one in, another light. You can see here it's updated in the outliner. I've just duplicated it, but it's now point light 2. So if I right click, point light 2, so these are two separate things. So if you had imagined you had a level with 50 lights in it, you would have to come in here and create references to 50 lights. So bear that in mind when we think about what a class blueprint is going to do to us for us down the line. But for this sake, I'm going to delete the second point light. Just going to delete it here. So we also need access to this trigger volume. So doing the exact same thing, I've selected it in the world in the outliner. I've come up to my map and I'm going to right click on it. So now instead of creating a reference to it, we want the trigger to be what you call it's going to handle an event for us. So an event is these things in red that you see are events. These are the things that start off your blueprint logic. So we don't want it to happen on event begin play or event tick. We want something to happen whenever we what you call overlap with that trigger volume. So when something overlaps with the trigger, we want the logic then to happen. So just with this, we can say add begin, actor begin overlap. So whenever we bring it in, you have this event appears, and as you can see, it's created an association to that trigger volume. Okay, so hopefully that's, so we've just to recap, we've went in, selected the object, come into our level blueprint, right clicked and created a reference to it. The same thing then on the trigger volume, we've come back into my map. So instead of creating a reference to it, we actually want to create the functionality from it. So we're actually wanting to create an event from it. So we want when something begins an overlap with it, we want some logic to happen. So what's the logic we want to happen? Well, if you think, what did we turn off there in the point light? Well, it was called visible. Okay, so we want to look for something called visibility within that. So how do we do that? Well, remember, we've got a reference to our point light, and what that's doing is that is effectively getting us access to all these parameters here. All these things are associated with this reference to that light. So we could drag off here and get something about light color. We could get something about radius, length, temperature, etc. Okay, so if I typed in get color, that's going to get this. That final output here will give us red at the minute. Okay, so if we were to then drag off and say radius, okay, set attenuation radius, we could come in here and type 2000, and that would effectively override this value here. So hopefully that's clear enough. So this bit of reference is giving us access to all these parameters and values that are associated with it. So the one that we want is visibility. So if we type in like visibility, and I'm just selecting the point light component there one, we want, and again, the logic of blueprints works from left to right. So an event will always start it, and then the blue ones then are effectively what you call functions. So these go in sequence from left to right. So the event starts it, and then the logic then goes here, and then if after we set the visibility we want it to do something else, let's say a delay, then after that happens we want set, let's put the string saying hello, So this starts it. That would be the first thing that happens. Once this is finished, it goes on to this node. Once that finishes, it goes into this node, and so forth. So that's the way blueprints will work from left to right. There are other nodes in there which will allow us to split things up, but for this current tutorial, we're keeping it just with this simple functionality. So I'm just going to delete those two at the end. So I've just left clicked and selected around them and hit delete. So if we do this, you can see here that this is a new visibility boolean, and this is actually an option for us to tick. So that means true. So when an actor overlaps this trigger volume, you want to set the visibility of something. And what is that something? It's the point light, and we want that to be true. So if I do that thing called compile, watch what happens up here. That is give us all good. Okay, the green tick. So now if we come back to the map and get our player and go into the box, when the player has overlapped that trigger volume, it has executed the code, and it's so we can actually see that in play. So let's try and fix our real estate here. So I'm just dragging about here, and the map is selected. Let's see if this works. Yep, okay. So currently the blueprint, you can actually see this triggering. So watch what happens to the line between the event and the set visibility here when the player enters it. You can see it firing. So that it's telling you which bit of logic has actually happened there. Now this will only, each time we go in here, it'll fire. So something has overlapped the trigger again. But obviously because we've set the light to be true, it hasn't turned itself off. So how do we fix that so it turns itself off? Well, the same thing. We need to get the trigger again, because the trigger is the thing that's controlling the overlap. So when we get the trigger, but this time our event, this isn't a begin. It's actually on actor end overlap. So whenever the actor comes out of the overlap, we want the same thing to happen here. So what we could do is I could just Control C that and Control V, just copy paste and link it together. Now watch what happens here if I hit compile. Oh dear, we've got a problem. So this is telling you there's something wrong here with our logic. So what have we not done this time? Well, we haven't given it a target. So what we can do is select, just with our left mouse button, go to the end of where it says point light component and drag that into target. And then try and hit compile again. All good. We've got the green arrow. Awesome. But what do we also need to do now? Well, because our visibility, we don't want it to be true. Whenever the player comes out of it, we want it to turn off again. So we want it to be hidden. So now if we hit compile again, and then hit play in our world, when the player goes into it, it fires and comes on. But when we come out, the second one fires. So just to say it again, when we go in, the begin overlap triggers and sets the visibility to true for the light. And then when we come out of the trigger, the visibility then is set to false. So hopefully that's okay. Just to give you an example of what's happening here with the event overlap and the event tick. So as I said, the event begin play is the first thing that nearly every level will have anyway. And what we could do here is just for demo purposes, I'm just going to get a reference to the light and see what I've done this time, folks. I've just dragged the reference into the level. So I didn't right click and create the reference. I've just dragged it in. So what I'm going to do here is when the level starts, so this is irregardless of something going into it and into that trigger volume. So we're not going to use the trigger volume for this example. We're going to create a delay. So a delay is just what it means. A pause, it's like a hold. So I'm going to say for 5 seconds, we're going to delay for 5 seconds. And then what we're going to do is set our visibility to be true. Then I'm going to select again a delay. I'm going to say 5 seconds. And then I'm going to do the same thing again, just left click and drag, set visibility. And I'm just going to drag to here. And I'm going to turn it off again. So hopefully you can see this bit of logic. So this is irregardless of anything overlapping the light this time. So when the level starts, it's going to hold for 5 seconds. Once that 5 seconds is up, it's going to find the light in the world. It's going to turn its visibility on. It's going to wait another 5 seconds and then turn the visibility off. So just going to, let's see if we can get the player reference here. Just going to drag it out here. Just going to rotate it so we're looking into our room. And then I'm going to just resize that so you can see this here. So watch what happens at the event begin play. So we're waiting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The light should come on. There we go. Now we're waiting another 5 seconds, 2, 1, and the light should go off. Okay. So that's what event begin play does. It's the first thing that sort of way runs in your world. We'll come back to event tick, but again, it's just to show you what event begin play was doing there. It was setting the logic off for that. So an interesting point to think about here is whenever we hit play and run into this, the player will obviously make the light come on. So within our trigger, you can see here that we've got an option here to check what is the actor. So if you remember from our other sessions, an actor is pretty much anything that can be, any of these things can be classed as actors within Unreal. So it's pretty much anything that can be placed in your world as such. So in this case here, imagine that we had another object. So let's say a football or something, or a sphere. So just for demo purposes, just want to show you this here in play. So we have brought this sphere in here, slightly too big. So I'm just going to change the size of it here to something like that, maybe slightly smaller. Set it to movable. I'm going to set simulate physics. So again, don't worry too much about this here. It's just for demo purposes here. I'm going to make it generate overlaps. Say block wall. And then I'm just going to move it pretty much in front of the door here. So when the player hits the ball and the ball overlaps the trigger, the light comes on. Now obviously the ball's not going to come out on its own, but just to see that again there, hit play, just watch what happens here when our trigger gets activated. The ball goes into the trigger and it comes on. So is this really the logic we want to happen? Because that means pretty much if anything overlapped with that trigger in the game, that this set visibility would then kick in. So what we can actually do is we can specify and tell the engine to actually, I want you to be specific what the other actor is that's overlapping with it. So how do we do that? Well, if you notice here, our player is called it's the third person. So the third person game mode, and you can see here it's this third person character. So BP third person character. So that's the thing that is effectively overlapping here. So if I was to drag out from this and type in third person, you can see that we get this node coming up saying cast to. So I'm just going to select it and show you this and link it up. So it comes up like this blue node here, and we're going to drag the executable into it, and then we're going to drag our executable into that. So what the logic is it here is when this trigger volume gets overlapped, it's going to check what is the actor that actually overlapped into that trigger volume, and it's going to check, hello, are you a third person character? If that's true, it'll continue, and if it fails, it'll come off with something else. So actually for this sake here, I'm just going to put a print string in. It's like a debug, folks. So really, I'm just going to say not player. So I'm going to hit compile on that, and then we're going to go back in and play the level. So this time, because we have specifically told the trigger to look out for the third person character before it'll turn the light off, if it's not the character, i.e. the sphere, the ball, it'll should print as this message on screen here, and we'll print it up for 4 seconds or so. So let's hit play and then hit the ball into it. No, you see the way the field then hit activate it, and we got the print string up at the top corner. So just again, watch what happens here to our field, and watch what happens up here when the print string enables. So we're just going to run, hit the ball. There we go. Okay, so the light didn't come on that time. So now we can bypass the thing, the ball, and come in ourselves. And you can see here now it's went, oh, hello, third person character, and the visibility is then come back on. So this is a feature, folks, you will be using quite a lot going forward in Blueprints called casting, but it's way beyond the scope of what we're doing here. But I thought just for example's sake here, we would use it here. So I'm just going to take that out, to be honest, and put that back into play. So now our ball will work again here if so needed. What other thing then? Actually, just whilst we had that print string on there. So if we did the event begin play, remember I told you, if we did the print string, watch what happens again up on our viewport here. You will see the message appearing, and it only appears once, and then it'll disappear after 2 seconds. Okay, so it only gets called once. But as I said to you, what happens is if you use the event tick node, the event tick constantly fires. It just keeps going until told otherwise to stop. So if I hit play this time, look what happens. So it's constantly firing, and it's constantly generating this message, hello, hello, hello. That's just never, that's never going to stop here, pretty much. So it just shows you that, you know, you could use this here. You use it sparingly if you can within your blueprints, but it's just to make you aware again the difference between the event begin play fires once, but the event tick just keeps going, and you can see here the engine is just showing you here with the executable wires being lit that it's just keep going. So I'm just going to hit escape, and that stops everything as well. So hopefully that was okay for your level blueprint. So how does this then change? I'm just going to delete, by the way, our or sphere here, just take that out. So all good. We have a light working now, we can run into it. But imagine you wanted to set up this light system for 10 rooms, and you wanted to have a light system that could be used in other levels. So if you recall, this is only going to work within this my map level. It won't work out. So if we create a new level, just to show you, new level, basic, create, and we hit play. Oh, we don't have a room, we don't have our blueprints. If we went up to our level blueprint, we have no code in here. It's gone because this is now in this untitled map. So that's not very useful in regards to creating code. So I'm just going to search for map again, and we're going to find my map and open it again, and we're back to where we were. So how do we resolve this? Well, we did through creating a class blueprint. So I'm just going to come into our level blueprint one last time here, and I'm going to just disable this code. And what we're going to do is create a class blueprint that does the same functionality, but it's going to be a lot more reusable as a developer. So how do we do that? Well, if I just clear all this, and again, we talked about organizing yourself and organized structures whenever you're building projects. I'm going to right click and create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Blueprints. Okay, so you've got a Blueprints folder. I'm just going to press enter and go into it. So now when you right click in the content browser, or when you select at the top, you can see it gives you an option to create a new empty blueprint class. Okay, not a level blueprint, a blueprint class. So I'm just going to select that, and it gives you all these options. So these are everything that you could possibly make a blueprint about in Unreal, and let's say there is quite a number to work with. But for our sake here, we're just going to use the first one. An actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. So I'm just going to select actor. I'm going to give it a location, and I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it BP. Remember our naming conventions. So BP blueprint _ light. And I'm going to hit save and watch what happens. So now we have our blueprint interface is opened yet again here. But notice we've got a few new extra settings here, and new extra windows is appearing. Now we have, rather than just the My Blueprint panel as we've seen in the level blueprint, we also have this option tab called Components appearing. And we no longer just have an event graph. We have also got a viewport on this thing called the construction script. So these are extra features you will find whenever you create a blueprint class. So what does all this mean? So under the components are all the bits and pieces that you can sort of like sandwich up into this blueprint itself. So for our sake here, we can see it in the viewport here, and currently we have nothing except for this thing called a scene root. It's just an empty root component. It doesn't do anything. So if I was to hit file, save all, and you actually drag this into your world, this blueprint, and hit play, you can't see it. It's not there. So how do we add things to it? Well, you can see here under the components tab of a blueprint class that you can add new components to this actor. So what things do we need to replicate what we had in the level blueprint? Well, if I hit add, well, look at one of the first things there. We get access to a point light. Well, actually, we do need a point light because that was our main light. So I'm going to add it, and I'm just going to hit compile and drag it in and I'm gonna select the one we originally added to our level and delete it, so we're not. Actually, I'm just gonna move it out of the way, to be honest. So now this thing here in the room is actually a blueprint on its own. Now, we haven't added any code and functionality to it. Okay, so hopefully you can see it's actually lit up over here. But notice here, under the details of it, we don't see anything about a light except for here. So if I double click just to go back into it, or it's still actually open here, just so we can see it a bit clearly in our world, I'm going to change this one to blue. So we've created a blue light. Hit compile and hit play. There we go. There's actually a light floating about there somewhere that is a blue color. So how do we get? Let's add something else to it here to help with visibility. So we're going to it and we're going to add another component. So this time we're going to add, I don't know, a static mesh. Well, as you can see, we've added the static mesh component here. And the same way under the point light, you get all the parameters associated with it. The static mesh is the same. You get these parameters available for what is the static mesh. So you can see here, currently we have set it to none, but we want this to be a 3D model effectively. So if I type in something like lamp, because I've got this the starter content available, I'm going to put it in, and you can see here that we now have two things in our blueprint. So if I just hit compile, go back to what we see in the level, we now have this appearing. So anytime that I bring in that, so we have updated this and it's going to update that. Okay, so for demo purposes, if we added, I don't know, another static mesh for some weird reason, or actually let's add a sphere and let's put it over here and hit compile. Now our blueprint has been updated with all those bits. And so as I said, that thing about sandwiching things, so we've sandwiched two static meshes together here and a point light. Currently you still have no coding functionality in it, but sometimes you don't need to have coding functionality in it. You more than likely will. But for this case here, we currently have none. So obviously we don't need the sphere, so I'm just going to select it and hit delete. What we're going to do then is reorganize this. So I'm going to grab the, going to select the point light. Did you notice what happened there? When we move the point light, the static mesh is also moving. So what has happened here is, if you can see this, the static mesh is actually sort of indented underneath the point light. So what that means is this has become a parent of that. So if this point light is moved, this will also move. So we don't actually want that. So we want to be able to move these two things independently. So if I select this, the static mesh at this level, we could move it. But what I want to do is I want to drag it up to here. So I'm just left clicking on it and dragging it to where it says default scene root. And you can see here, drop here to see available actions. So this time here, I don't want to make a new route. I want to actually just attach it. So now if I grab the point light, we can move it up in the world. And again, I'm just navigating, by the way, in the viewport, folks, the same way as you move in your game level. WASD, right mouse button, left mouse button, etc. So we've got that. And then if I hit compile and we look at our hopefully you can see there we have the two things actually in the level now. So if I were to bring that inside here, actually I think that's better because you'll see the blue light then. so that the actual blue light is being emitted from that. Just to prove that, if we went back into our BP light and we got the point light this time and changed it to green. Now if we hit compile and go back into our map, the actual light being emitted from the point light in that blueprint is now green. So hopefully that's clear enough so far. So we have added a static mesh, so we could actually right click on that and rename it and call that not model. Sorry, model. Okay, or you could SM lamp. Okay, so it's just to make you aware that that's available over there. And we've got our point light there. So that's all great, but what else did we have up in our level viewport? Well, we actually had a trigger, if you recall. So the actual invisible box that the player could run into. So in this case as well, if we look for something maybe called a box collision, and again I'm just going to drag it up the top there so I don't want it, and I'm going to just change the extents of it here. So again, with this component selected, you can see over here the details panel for it has also been changed. So under the Z, I'm just going to change it out a wee bit, make this a bit thicker. Also going to move it up. So now our BP light is made up of 3 components. It's made up of this invisible collision box, it's made up of the static mesh, and it's made up of the point light. So if we have a look at that in the world, you can now see that it has been updated. And actually I'm just going to grab this light and bring it over here to against our wall so we can see the light shining on it. Okay, so great stuff. Now, how do we do this? So whenever the player runs near the lamp, we want the lights to come on or off. So we need to fix that, and we need to code that. So if we go back into our light, and if you recall, up in the level blueprint we had our event graph, and look what we have available here now. So we've actually had the event begin play as usual, we have event begin tick, and we also have event begin overlap. So just to keep things clean, I'm actually going to delete all these, just left click and dragging around them and hitting delete. So what do we want to work off? So we've got this box collision, but I'm going to rename it to player trigger. And I'm going to right click, just the same way we did in our level blueprint. If we So with it selected, the component here, you can right click then and you can see this here thing up here is called just the same way event for player trigger. So this time the same thing, we want on component begin overlap. And you can see it's slightly different this time. And we also want a reference to our light the same way we had in our level blueprint. And we also want to change our light visibility the same way. We want to disable it. So the lights, whenever we in our world now, are now off by default. Okay, they're off. So that's what that did there. So when we drag this off, we want to check set visibility again. I can spell. And we want it to go true. So let's try that. So if we come over to this and we go into the volume, see now, we've walked into this instance of the light, the BP light. So if we then find this instance of the light and go into its trigger box, it'll come on too. So if we added another few lights in the world, we can do the exact same thing. So if we come over to this one, its light comes on. We can leave that one. We don't want that one's light to come on, but we want this one's light to come on. And we want this one's light to come on. So effectively what you've done here is, this is an instance. So you've created, this is the object you've built, but you can drag different instances into your level, and they can all interact, and you can change different things within them as well going forward here. So again, if you think of a level designer, using the Blueprint system to help prototype stuff, you could start to build up some real complexity here. So same thing again, if we come back in here and then get our player trigger, and we go back to our event collision, and again, we want it to end overlap, and this time with the point light, we want the point light to set visibility, and we want to set its visibility to off. Okay, so when the player or an actor goes from the visibility or comes out of the trigger, then the light will go off. So if we go into it here, comes on, come out of it, goes off, into it, on, off, on, off. Yeah. So if I were to try and drag this out here just the same way we did previously, now I get the right amount of real estate here you can notice here that under our BP light, it's actually found that you now have 5 references in your world of BP light. So if I were to, wrong thing there. If I drag that out and create another instance, you can see now that we now have 6. So we know that this one here is called BP Light 6. And just to keep things simple, I'm going to hit play. And this one here straight in front of us is BP6. So you can see the same thing whenever you run into it. Oh, we not got the right one selected. No, we didn't. So if I go into BP6, you can see it's highlighted there in the viewport. And now we run into it, you can see it firing. So again, if you're doing this here, if this one here is BP Light 2, this one's BP Light 1. So if we went up here and changed it to BP Light 1, hit play, you can see it firing. But if you went in here, you'd be going, well, it's not firing. It's not firing. Well, it's not firing because the right light isn't selected in the BP light viewer there. So just be wary of if you have multiple instances of the same blueprint in the level and trying to work out why it's firing. So we've now created a very simple light system that can not only be used within this level. So we could create another new level, basic, create again. Yes, I'll save it. And if you recall, last time we had nothing in here, and if we wanted to build this up again, you would have had to create your code again on the level blueprint. But now you've built this thing that has all that functionality ready in it. So now you can just run in and drag it into your world, and it's there for you to use. So a blueprint class is much more powerful and such a better way to do things in a level blueprint. 99% of the time. So please use both, but more than likely you'll be making the name here. You'll be using the Blueprint classes. So we could extend this further here. So if I select this and click to edit the blueprint, you can do this over in the viewer. We could add more functionality to this. So maybe we want that when the player comes into it, that they have to press space bar or something like that to toggle the visibility. Well, how do we do that? Well, off this here, there's a thing called enable input. And there's another one called disable input. And if you right click anywhere, you could type in space. And you can see here you've actually got keyboard defense. I'm going to select that one, and you can see now when the space bar is pressed, we can get it to do things when the space bar is pressed and when it's released. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just disable here and here. So I'm just left clicking and breaking those links. I'm selecting left click around them all, and then I'm clicking and holding and dragging and bringing it down here. So what I'm going to say now is when the player enters the collision box, we're going to enable input, and when we exit, we're going to disable input in regards to being able to press functionality on it there. One thing we'll need to do, as you can see here, we need a reference to the player controller. So for this sake, I'm just going to hold left click and drag backwards and just type in player controller, get player controller. So again, this is something we'll cover a wee bit more detail down the line, but for this sake here, I'm just going to put that in play there. And then what we're going to be able to do is when we come into the trigger, we get access to the input system, i.e. keys, etc. When we come out of it, you shouldn't be able to press space bar because it's disabled. So I'm going to link that up. Okay. And then I'm just going to delete that one off initially here just to keep this as simple as possible. So let's see what happens here. Yeah, that's hit compile. So now our logic can't come in here. You know, I'm in the trigger, but nothing's happened. The light hasn't come on. But what we're doing is we're actually inside the trigger now, and we've told it can enable input. So if you press spacebar, you've effectively enabled input. So if you come out of that again and press spacebar, if it's actually set the jump, perhaps spacebar was the wrong key here. Let's go in and change it to something else there. So let's press F there. So let's try it again. Come in. If I press F, none of the lights come on, so I'm pressing F on the keyboard, nothing's happening. So if I go over to the light, we're inside its trigger volume, so it's been told it can enable input. Now if I press F, the light comes on. Over this one, inside its trigger volume, press F, light comes on. Over here, press F, light comes on. Okay, so what we could do is add another small bit of functionality. So we understand once we come into the trigger, we enable input, so we can hit F and it comes on, and pretty much it stays on. But what we could do then is, back to our blueprint, we could add another component to the blueprint itself. So this time we want to maybe have a message on screen as well. So if you look up a thing and just look for text render, so within the viewport, you can see here that we have now added this node here. So if we bring it up, it actually just is say this is text that we can customize. So the same way as usual, when you select a component, the details panel updates to represent what's available to manipulate there. So here's the default, and this is the default message here, TXT. So we're going to change it to say something like press F to activate. So we've got a message now coming through it. Let's something through the middle like that. Hit compile, and now we'll go back to our play. So you can see there that, yeah, it's right this way. So we've got the message, but we don't want the message to be there whenever the game starts. We only want this message to appear when the player goes into this trigger volume, and then whilst they're in the trigger volume, they can press F to turn the light on. But once they leave the trigger volume, we want the message to disappear and the light to turn back off. Okay, so we're going to extend the functionality here to make that happen. So we've got our message. Maybe we rotate it around because I think it liked it that way. So we'll have the message there. If you scroll down then, similarly to what we did with the light, we also have this option in regards to rendering. So rendering is the drawing of the stuff onto the screen. So you have this option here, hidden in game, whether to hide the primitive in game and if the primitive is visible. So what we can do is change that to false. So whenever the game starts, it effectively is hidden from the player. So we're going to use that as a value, and then we're going to customize that as we put in the code here. So similarly, we want to get a reference to our text render. So we can drag in from here. And notice when we do this, by the way, folks, so if under components, so up here, if we just drag in, it automatically does what you call a get on that. But we can also do other things on it, like set. So we'll have a look at that shortly. But it's just to make you aware that we can do various things to these components. We can get values from it, and we can also set values into it. So I'm just going to left click, drag that back in, and we're going to drag off, and we were looking for set hidden. So we're saying here, when the trigger is overlapped, we enable input and we set the hidden value of that to be true. So the message appears. Let's try it. So we hit play with no message there, but once we come into it, oh, didn't do it. Strange. Let's have a look at that. Oh, yeah, of course it is. So we're setting it to true. Hi, silly. So let's do it again. So message is hidden, and then when we come in, press F to activate. We press F, light comes on. And obviously when we come out of it, the message is still staying there and the light is still staying on. So let's fix that. So under the light, then if we get, so we're wanting what happens whenever we end the overlap. So what happens when we come out of the trigger? So we want to set the hidden. We want to set that back to true. So the message is no longer there. And then we also want to do something to the light. So I'm going to simply left click and drag around the point light and set visibility and hit Control C, hit Control V, and then notice where your arrow is. That's where the nodes will paste in. So I'm just going to link that together. So if we walk through the logic here, when the overlap ends, we disable input so the player can't do anything, can't use the keyboard. We're going to set the text render to hidden again, and then we're also going to set the visibility of the point light to be false. Okay, so back in, let's hit play. Yep, so in this one, we hit F, it activates. When we come out, it goes away. Back in, we can hit F, goes away. Hit F. Yep, so seems to be working as we intended. So just again, building up the logic, that's all you're doing with Blueprints. You're taking it bit by bit, piece by piece, and then pretty much talking through the steps of what you want to happen. So in programming terms, there is a thing called pseudocode where you would just write down in English what you want to happen in your logic. So something like when the player walks to the door, an explosion happens. When the player walks to the door, it checks if they've got the key. If not, door is locked. If yes, then the door could open. So this is effectively what you're wanting to do here. So to help other people with readability of what you're trying to do, yes, they may understand, okay, this is the blueprint and it's called light, so they should have a fair idea of it. They should be able to see the components that make it up. But what you can also do is what you call comment your code. So if you select and drag around all the nodes you want to do this with, so I've selected all those and hit the letter C, C for Charlie, you'll get this node appearing called comment. And this is where you can type in what happens. So you could say when player enters trigger input enabled text shows, and then subsequently when leave trigger disable input hide text hide light. So you can go up here, you can change the color of the comment based on what you want to do here. You can change the font size of it there as well. If I can spell disable. You can do that. And then again, you could do it for, press F key when input enabled sets lights visibility to true. Again, how well you comment your code is always a benefit to the team. You may have standardization, but if you think about once your blueprints become very complicated, you're going to have quite a lot potentially in a blueprint class. So you really do need to get into the sort of good practice of commenting what you're doing there for your other team members, should they need to take over your script, or should this be getting sent down the pipeline to someone else. It's always helpful. So with this code that we've been working on, typically anything that happens in the event graph is to be actioned during gameplay. But the other tab that we haven't looked at here is the construction script. And the construction script is incredibly powerful for the likes of whenever you're designing the level and helping the sort of overall feel and design and layout. So if you think about what we've been doing here, we've been adding these blueprints of this light. So we have 6 instances of a light here, and they're all pretty much the exact same. But if you think you were a designer in the level, it would be very good if you had control over this at runtime, to select, say, the color of the light or its intensity or something like that. Well, that's where we can actually do this within the construction strip. So if we go back to it there, we're going to be doing a few interesting things here. So we're going to get the point light. We're just going to get a reference to it as usual. And if you look at the point light, this thing here is called light color. So what we want to do is get access to this, but then give the level designer the ability to change this, should they wish, without having to come into the actual blueprint light. And remember, if you change this within here, all the lights will turn green. But we want to have each light maybe being able to have their own color. So this light will be blue, this one will be purple, this will be green, this will be pink. But currently our configuration here doesn't let you sort of do that. So what we can do is drag off here, and we want to look for color, and we're going to set light color. So we've got this node up here. We're going to link it up, and this happens every single time you move anything about. So this will always get fired whenever you're designing the level, pretty much anytime you move or change anything. So this is the actual parameter here that handles the color, and if you click on it, you see that it brings you up a swatch, and you can go in and change that accordingly. So we can come in and change that to, I don't know, purple, and hit play. Yeah. Okay. So, but we want to be able to change this on a per light basis. So how do we do that? Well, there's these things in program called variables, which are effectively the things that store your data, for you to use at a later point in time. And variables can be all sorts of things, from scores, times, names, whatever. But in this case here, we're actually wanting to store the light color and do something with it. So we've done it previously. We're going to drag out from it with our left mouse button and let go. And you can see here the very first things we get is promote to variable. So I just want you to select promote to variable nicely here. Don't worry about local variable. And you can see here this thing appears. It also appears over here under your components. So we're going to change, with it selected, we're going to give it a name, and we're just going to call it R light color. But what we also want to do is make it, and I'm just going to give it a description here called change this light's color. And the thing that we want to enable is this option here, instance editable. So if you hover over it, whether this variable is publicly editable on instance of this blueprint. So if I select that and click tick, and then just hit compile, and you'll see now that under that we now have this little eyeball appearing. So if I tick that away, the eyeball's closed, meaning it's not instance editable. But if I tick it on, so what is this all about? So if I hit compile and go back to it, now if you select the lights, look what you've got available for you. So each light now has this feature that we can go, actually, we want your light color to be yellow, we want your light color to be green, you're going to be blue, you're going to be aqua. So then if you hit play, That one's not very bright. We'll fix that in a second. There we go. That one's green. Yep, that one works. This is the other one. One's green as well. Pink. Yep. So if we just double check something, the current light color, the default, its default value. So if you don't change anything, or if you don't amend anything here, it will use its default as there. So if we drag in a new light, a new BP light, its default will be that pink color. Hopefully it's got that. So let's do something else. So we've set an ability to change the light color. How about let's change in the light's intensity? So we'll drag out again. And now we're going to have an ability for the level designer to change the intensity. So we'll do the same thing again. So the variable we created this time for the light color was a color. You can see there, linear color structure, and it has those values in it. This value here we're going to change as a float. So a float would be a number, precise number that you could use for likes of time, etc. as well. So we're just going to drag out from it, and we're just going to promote the variable. And we're going to call this a R light intensity. And we're going to call it, give it a description. Intensity, and we're going to do that thing again, instance editable. Hit compile. Now notice here our default value for a float is 0. So if we left that at 0, we would have no light color coming through because it's so low. So let's set it up to something like, I don't know, 1500. So now when we hit compile, you can see now that each light has the color thing available for it and its intensity. So let's say this one in here, let's create its intensity and be really bright, 8000, and want it to be orange color. And this one here was quite low, so we'll set it yellow. We'll make it, I don't know, 10,000. And this one over here, we want it to be green, and we'll make it 500. So let's see how that's impacted. So this one on here, nice and bright, goes orange. This one here's not so bright, going green. And this one here should be quite bright as well. And that matches what we had set up there. So if we went in and changed that one to red, set it 20,000 this time. Actually went and changed that too, so it should be red, and there you go, quite intense. We could select this one and go, actually level designer says no, we need a pink light in there, and we need it to be just subtly bright. Actually probably too low. Let's go to 500 on that one. So now it's no longer bright. It's just a nice subtle pink. This one here again should be nice and bright. So you can do this with any of these things here. So I don't know why we would do it, but let's grab the text render as well. And let's have a look here. So what you'll be doing here is setting the text. Okay, so instead of this message being press F to activate, we could create a different message here at runtime for the level designer. So we drag it over here and it's like set text. Okay, you can notice here that the value it accepts is type text. So same thing again, drag off it, create a variable from it, call it my message, and again give it a default message. So our default message is what? Press F to activate. Just hit and compile, and remember we need to hit instance editable, because if we don't and hit play, you can see here it doesn't allow us to access it to manipulate here for the designer. So if we go back, make sure that's enabled, instance editable, hit compile, go back, and now we've got this my message option appearing too. So let's say this light here, we don't want it to say press F to activate. We want it to say howdy doody, because that's what every light should say. This one here, when we go into it, we'll say you are awesome. And this one here says correct. You can press F. Okay, so I know it's a bit random, but it's just giving you an idea of this construction script allows designers a very powerful way to edit things prior to the game running. So this is really useful for design purposes. So if we go back in and hit play, we've got the standard message here, press F to activate, but we have overridden that message for here. And this one says howdy doody. Now you can still press F obviously, but this one says you're awesome. And this one you can press F. So hopefully this is starting to come together. The last one then we'll have a look at in this case is maybe let's get the scene route actually this time. Okay. So notice what we can do here, and what we're going to is the scale. So we're going to have the ability to change the overall scale of the full blueprint here. So I'm going to say set scale, just do relative transform, that's same for this case. And you can notice here that it actually has a triple value input here. So this is what you call a vector 3. So it needs 3 values. So I'm going to just drag off exact same, promote the variable, and call it asset scale. Hit compile, and remember to give it a default, because if you leave it at 0, like you can't see them because they're pretty much zeroed down to nothing. So if we make it 1 is the default, this is them all customized. So now we could come in here, this one here, we're going to change its light to red. We're going to change its light intensity to super bright. We're going to change its message to I'm so bright. Oh, and what did we not do? Just checking. Okay, and then we give it a message as well, set PP overall scale. Hit compile, go back, and now we've got a default asset scale here. So this one here, we're going to leave it as 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, so it's half the height. This one here, we're going to come in and change it to 2, 2, 2. We're going to change this message to big light. We're going to set its intensity to 10,000. We're going to set it to purpley blue. And this one here We're going to set it to, let's see, 3, 3, 3. So it's a giant one. I'm the biggest. His intensity orange or something like that. And obviously we could go and do the same with those 3. So it's just to give you an indication there that now we've got, okay, I'm so bright, hit F, light comes on still. Big light is the message now. It's nice and bright. So and then I'm the biggest comes on. We can't see the light because the daylight's so bright. So that's the construction script, and hopefully you're seeing here, by creating these things called variables and making them editable, you can override and customize the values that the engine is storing for, to design your levels at runtime here. And I say you can do this for any single value you see here. So any of these, you could come in and change the mesh and create a variable for it. You could make it one to be physics, one not. Let's just do that on this one. So set simulate physics. I'm going to swear it up here, and you can notice this has a red option, and this is a boolean, so whether it's true or false. So I'm just going to come out of here and create the variable, and then just say enable physics, hit compile, and give ourselves a default value. So I'm going to leave it as physics is off for them. Going to make sure the editables are, and then just give it a description. Does asset have physics, and hit compile, come back to it. So currently, actually just have a look at that. So physics enabled, it's not there, so, or not enabled for any of them. So if we run over to them, nothing is gonna happen. But then if we come in and say, right, you over here, physics is enabled for you, and physics is enabled for you. So hopefully we can come in here and we can start to play light football or something, I don't know. Same with this one out here. So these ones don't have physics. Oh, should know. Was that the one that set physics enabled on? Oh, it must have been. Yeah, so this one has physics enabled. And the thing is, you can still press F when if you're inside the trigger. So we are. So hopefully you get the idea here. You could play about with these here. Heart's content. So again, there we are. So in the construction script, we have used this for a whole host of variables, from a color to a number to text to a triple value digit to a true and false, and making sure instance editables ticked will give you the ability to customize this at the design process here. So incredibly powerful. So I think this will maybe be enough to get you going on that. So just a quick recap then. We have our level blueprint, which is useful if you have a small amount of information. We can then and more preferably create these class blueprints. The class blueprints then are made up of these components. The components then have their own values. Those then can subsequently be brought into your event graph, and you can create logic based around that. The logic starts in an event and goes through these functions. It goes from left to right in that order, in that sequence. And then we should also say it's also context sensitive. So if you drag off this and make sure this is enabled, this will only give you options you should be able to do on this particular variable. If you disabled that, you can see here you get access to every single thing within Unreal, but they may not and won't work with that particular type of object or that type of function or that type of variable. So again, that's something to be very wary of. So hopefully that was okay. We could do maybe a slight bonus thing. And we'll maybe add that to the video at the end here. But have a go at these first of all and see how you get on.